Sony Trinity, the 16 to 35, 24 to 70, and the 70 to 200 f2.8 GM2. Let's talk about them in this video, but let's go inside because it's a little too bright and windy out here right now. Follow me to the endpoints of the gimbal. Oh wow, it kept going. It goes all the way, that's the end. Oh, and while we go inside, if you're interested in getting my free 2.5 hour wedding photography course, as well as free preset pack and wedding day shot list, you can get that down below if you're interested. Let's talk more in the kitchen, shall we? I've just arrived in Iceland from Sony Condo. We are running a workshop here in Iceland. I can't stand up straight or this thing appears too much in my face. And if you're interested in coming to a workshop that we run, my friend Cole and I are doing one in Majorca coming up pretty soon. This one here in Iceland was awesome, but Majorca, it's gonna be warmer, so that's nice. At Sony Condo, I had a chance to use a number of lenses that I don't normally use. Most of the videos that you ever see on the channel are products that I actually own or that I've had for an extended period of time. The Trinity of Sony lenses I don't actually use ongoing on wedding days, so maybe a bit of a disclaimer for that. That said, I did post in my Facebook group and asked what the #1 lens that most people use on a wedding day is, and the 24 to 70 came up well over 50% of the time, so I thought it was important to spend some time with it at Sony Condo and see how I got along with it. I'm going to show you samples from the 24 to 70 as well as the 70-200, and then also the 16 to 35. If I had to rank them in order of usefulness on a wedding day, 24 to 70, definitely #1, followed by the 70-200 for bigger ceremonies or even just as an all-day lens. I know a lot of people can just use a 70-200 pretty much all day, maybe with the exception of a few photos you need something wider for. But for candids, for just getting that really nice background separation, and especially with the Sony 70-200 GM2, the weight has come down a lot, and I could definitely see myself getting by most of a wedding day just with that lens. I used to shoot an 85mm prime for a lot of wedding days, pretty much from start to finish, with a few of those shots, maybe with 35 for something more establishing or if it's a bigger group shot. But other than that, I was always pretty happy to have my 85mm lens. So let's talk about the most useful one first, the 24 to 70 f2.8. So the first step up that the Sony 24 to 70 f2.8 GM2 has over the original GM is its weight, its performance, and its size overall. It is a very ergonomically great lens, and I am very happy to use a lens like this all wedding day. On the channel, I've used bigger lenses like the Canon 28 to 70 f2, which is amazing, but it's so big. The 24 to 70 GM2 definitely checks the ergonomic box for me as an all-day wedding lens. The build quality, the materials, the overall feeling of this lens, really, really nice. There's also a switch on the side if you want your zoom ring to be a little bit tighter or if you want it to be easier to move. I think my favorite part about the 24 to 70 f2.8 GM2 is its size and just how portable and easy it is to bring with you for travel photography, for family photography, for really any style of photography. A 24 to 70 is an incredible tool, and it is one that a lot of people have in their bags. On the GM2, the aperture ring can be clickable or not clickable, so if you really want that smooth transition between f-stops, you can do that. For me personally, I set it to A and control it with the front wheel on my camera. On the side, there's also a focus mode switch, so if you find yourself ever in the need to do manual focus, I feel like I don't ever on a Sony camera. If I do need manual focus, usually I'm just tapping the back and I'm just selecting the exact thing that I want to be in focus. If you're a macro photographer or somebody that needs a little bit more control, maybe the autofocus on and off switch will be used a little bit more. The optical performance of this lens, I was very happy with. I shot it at f2.8 pretty much the entire time, from corner to corner, really happy with the results. There's minimal distortion and chromatic aberration, as well as vignetting, and if those do bother you, you can just enable profile corrections when you get into Lightroom. I was also very, very happy with the color rendering, as well as how it handled flare and just all lighting conditions. When it comes to autofocus, I was using the lens on my Sony A9 Mark III, and it was honestly incredible. It is very fast, very accurate, and very quiet in both photography and video modes. Honestly, you will have no issues. The autofocus rarely, if ever, does anything that you're not expecting it to do. The quality of bokeh is really, really nice. Even at the wider end, when you're nice and close and you get that really nice shallow depth of field, the lens feels nice all the way from 24 to 70. You're obviously going to get the minimum shallow depth of field whenever you are at 70mm at f2.8 and your subject is a little bit closer to you. And the out of focus background I find to be very pleasing. The lens itself for a wedding day is incredibly versatile. You can do, and lots of people do, entire wedding days from 24 to 70. 24 is wide enough, so 20 to 75 might not always be wide enough. 24 to 70 I find is wide enough for wedding days, for wider group shots when lots of people just just keep ending up and piling into a room and adding themselves to the sides of groups. 24 can usually cover that. And I also find 24 wide enough to get dance floor party images, as well as anything that's a little bit tricky, like maybe a cake in a weird spot and you have to climb in a corner and shoot like this. But I have found in all of my weddings that 24 is definitely a wide angle lens that I can get by. But I will be talking about the 16 to 35 next in this video if wider does interest you. Overall, all things considered, I am very, very happy with the 24 to 70 f2.8 GM2. It is a lens that is ergonomically easy to bring with you on a wedding day. It can capture all the way from getting ready coverage to into the dance floor. And I completely understand why the focal range is one of the most popular for wedding photographers. Now, 16 to 35 GM2. Let's go somewhere that's not the kitchen though. Maybe over here. Now, the Sony 16 to 35 f2.8 GM2. This is also a great lens for weddings. It is a wider lens, so this all comes down to personal preference. So for me, I am typically, if you follow the channel, I shoot a lot of primes. So I usually shoot a 35mm prime and 85mm prime for most of the wedding day, as well as maybe a Tamron 35 to 150 for the ceremony and whatever else I want to use that lens for on the day. For me, I don't find myself gravitating towards 16 to 35. So this would probably be the last lens of the three I'm going to talk about that I would actually purchase. I would begin 24 to 70, go to the 70-200, and then end with the 16 to 35. Where I find the 16 to 35 very helpful is actually for any sort of self-filming. And I would say it would be a go-to lens for a lot of people. I know a lot of people on YouTube that is the official lens that they use pretty much all of the time, especially when self-filming, and also when traveling and creating any sort of video content. For me, there were definitely a few instances that I felt that 24 wasn't wide enough and I had to get to 16. This photo of Jason Vincent, maybe not the use case that you're supposed to use it for, but this scene here, I was limited by how far back I could go, and I knew that I wanted to get the entire, the roundness of this building. And I thought that the sun flare coming in was going to be really nice, and it ended up working out really well. So there are absolutely times that you can use a wider angle lens, and it also comes down to creativity and what interests you the most and what you want to look at and what you want to create. And if you see yourself gravitating towards wider shots, this is a lens for you. Overall, the size, weight, and optical qualities of this lens I am very, very, very happy with. I'm specifically happy, I would say, with the weight and the size of this lens, that a 16 to 35 or anything kind of within that range used to be quite heavy and pretty cumbersome. Like, it wouldn't just be a lens that you would put in your bag to use sometimes. It would be something that if you were carrying around that 1.5 kilogram lens all day, you were gonna want to use it maybe in situations that you shouldn't, just because you're like, I don't know, if you've ever done this on an engagement session where you're like, well, I haven't used this lens, I might as well put this on and see what we can do for a little variety. That is usually how I operate. But if you're someone that sees the world in wider frames of view, then this might be a lens for you. The optical qualities of this lens, very, very good. I didn't notice any chromatic aberration. The distortion is pretty minimal for how wide angle this lens is, as well as vignetting, and for complex scenes, it did really, really well. I'll also say for the colors, this goes for any of the GM2 lenses I'm going to talk about today. The color that is coming out of these lenses, I'm so happy with, and specifically the next lens we'll talk about, up against the Tamron 35 to 150, there are definitely differences, and I definitely prefer the 70-200. The autofocus overall in both photography and video on the Sony A9 III, as well as any other somewhat current Sony body, maybe even back to the A7 III, I am very, very happy with. It is fast, it is accurate, and it is quiet. For bokeh, it is a 2.8 lens, but if you do want to achieve that really shallow depth of field look with maximum bokeh, probably you want to go for something like 24 to 70 or even the 70-200. If you are shooting on the 16 to 35, I will say that I have a very strong affinity towards the aesthetic look at 16mm or something just really wide, but also with a shallow depth of field. I feel like it's something that you just don't see that often. That you usually see wide angle lenses used in wider scenes with maybe a small couple in there, but when the couple gets really close and you just have to pay attention to make sure they're not on the edges to be a little bit more distorted than they should be. But if they're a little bit more center composed and you're doing something close, it really creates a nice shallow depth of field. Overall, and for my honest opinion, I was very happy with this lens. I had a very nice time with it. Will it be one that I am buying? No, but that comes down to personal preference, and that I just don't find myself using wide angle lenses that much for wedding photography. If it was a lens to come out here to Iceland and film a lot of my content with, it would be a more likely lens for me to buy. But I am very, very happy with the 20mm f1.8G that I am filming most of my content with. And again, I am a bit of a bokeh connoisseur, so I like to shoot that lens at f1.8 pretty often and get that really nice out of focus background, where 2.8 is totally fine, but I would rather save a little bit of money and go with the 20mm f1.8 rather than having the slightly wider abilities, as well as the usefulness, the general usefulness of zooming all the way to 35. But again, that is my personal preference. Now, moving on to the lens that I was the most surprised by, 70-200 f2.8 GM2. We're gonna go maybe hang out with the bird. I feel like there's too much dynamic range here for me to sit beside the bird without lighting. Now the Sony 70-200 f2.8 GM2. This is probably the lens that I was the most excited about. I hadn't used this lens prior to this, so I think I was on the pre-production release for the other two. The 70-200 I didn't have a chance to use until Condo, and I am very, very happy with this lens. I will say it's a noticeable lighter 70-200 than I've ever used before. The older one was a bit heavier, and basically this mirrors everything that's been said so far, that the color is great, the autofocus is incredible, it's accurate, it's very quiet. But then the thing that I was the most excited about once I saw the images was the actual color coming off this lens. I feel like it just did a really good job of every detail, the micro contrast, the way all the images render together. I was very, very happy with this lens. Is it going to replace my Tamron 35-150 or potentially the Sigma 28-105 f2.8? I don't know. I find more use out of the Tamron 35-150 than I do out of a dedicated 70-200. There are lots of benefits that come with the Sony 70-200, including that you get unlock of all of the high frames per second. There's some limitations that Sony will put on third-party glass. This includes limitations on the IBIS, I believe, as well. And I am okay to sacrifice those in order to go with the Tamron 35-150 because I find it more useful for my personal wedding days. If you do find yourself in a lot of larger churches, which is maybe where I don't find myself, I find myself a lot of the time that I'm doing usually a ceremony on site at the reception space. Maybe it's a glass chapel of some sort. I rarely find myself at churches these days, but when I did, I found a lot of use in a 70-200 because I felt that I was pretty much all ceremony in a big church pinned against a 200mm end. And I was actually using my APS-C button, so I set one of my buttons to go to APS-C crop mode. And I feel like a lot of the time that I would hit that 200 and I would want to go into APS-C crop mode so I didn't have to walk directly in front of the couple to take pictures. And I can get the shots that I need either from the aisles on the outside or not going all the way to the front of the aisle in the middle. So if you do find yourself in a lot of larger ceremonies, I find that, I should also say that I do find the limitation of the 35-150 that I'm up against that 150 end a lot. Even during cocktail hour candids, I find myself using that APS-C button a lot to get a little bit more reach. And to answer honestly, what is the correct tool for me? I feel like it goes to the Tamron 35-150. Well, the 70-200 is an amazing lens. It is optically and everything better than the Tamron 35-150. The focal range I just find is not as useful for me personally. Again, if this does not resonate with you, if you know that you're in the market for a 70-200, don't let me sway you. It is the right thing for you if you know it's the right thing for you. For me though, I am pretty happy without having a 70-200 in my bag. When it comes to the video side of things, so maybe if you are a video shooter and you're gonna be doing a lot of events where you need that zoom range, I'm going to say that the Sony is probably going to be better for you, that they've handled the focus breathing really well and you have options in your camera to make focus breathing pretty much disappear completely if you want, as well as the IBIS and the autofocus is going to work perfect exactly as Sony has designed it. And if you do know you're going to be getting some really heavy use out of the 70-200 f2.8, it definitely makes sense for you to get. I was really happy with the results from the 70-200. I would say that of all of the lenses that I use, this one, it surprised me the most. I think first, when you pick it up in terms of its lightness, that it's not a really heavy lens like the old 70-200s, that the update, I would say, I think Gerald Undone had this in his video, that he often doesn't really recommend to go for the GM2 version, that it's like minimal differences, that if you don't own the first one, it makes sense to buy the second one, but if you do own the first one, it's rarely worth the upgrade. And I think that his decision was that the 70-200 was absolutely worth the upgrade to the GM2 version. And after using this lens for a day at Kando, I will say that I agree with that statement. It's a really nice lens, all things considered. It feels nice, it's well built. The background separation is really nice and it creates some really, really beautiful images that will surprise you. So there it is, the trio. Sony 16-35 f2.8 GM2, 24-70 f2.8 GM2, and the 70-200 f2.8 GM2. A really lovely combination of lenses. It's really windy here. Sorry if you've heard the wind for the entire video. And I was really, really happy that I got to use all of these lenses. If this is a kit that you're considering, I would say it will absolutely do the entire wedding day for you, regardless of what wedding day you go to. If you have these 3 lenses, you can absolutely get it done. That's all from me. If you're interested, get my free 2.5-hour wedding photography course. It is in the description below. It comes with a free preset pack, my wedding day shot list, and a whole bunch of other bonus extras. See you next time.